But okay,
One more
before
thing.
we go on, I did want to show. Um, can you please repeat that? Yes, correct. Absolutely. It's whatever the simulator starts with. And I can show. I'm trying to show you that right now. I'm just going to find the log file. Give me 1 second. Here they are.
Well,
So when the simulator runs, zoom up here. It produces this file that will have the same name as the start conditions pickle file that we fed the simulator, but it'll end with underscore log.txt. And what's really great about this is that it gives you a human readable analysis of exactly what the simulator did at every single point during the analysis. So you can see like these are very, very long files, right? If we've got 1,000 data points in terms of price, we're going to have 3,000 explanations for what was done here. But just quickly looking at it, I'm just going to jump to a random part of the simulator so we can see what it is. So here it's telling you that it's analyzing Uniswap V2. It tells you that the marginal price on Uniswap is 0.987781 USDC per TKN. So here you have to remember that I haven't yet modified this to take into account other numerals. So this is actually ETH per wrap staked ETH in this case. And it's telling you what you can buy wrap staked ETH for as well. So you can currently sell it for 98 cents and change, and if you want to buy it, you have to buy it for 99. It's telling you what the market price is, and then it's telling you that it's going to calculate the effective arbitrage trade that should occur to bring this protocol in line with the market price. For Uniswap V2, though, you have to do this a certain number of times because it's actually impossible to arbitrage or to perfectly arbitrage a constant product protocol in one trade. And remember, the simulator is ignoring gas. So it's telling you after 10 iterations, 1.85 wrapped staked ETH was sold for 1.82 ETH. And then the marginal price goes on Uniswap V2 after that should be such that it matches exactly what the market price is in whatever direction it happened to drag the spread. And then after that analysis is done and after that trade is completed, it will then give you a complete summary of the current state of that Uniswap V2 position. So here it's showing you that it's got 5,005 wrap stake ETH. It's showing you that it's got 4,955 ETH. It's telling you exactly how many fees it's earned in both of those token balances up to this point in the simulation. It tells you the market price of wrap stake ETH in this case, the current portfolio value, the current HODL value if the liquidity provider had chosen to do nothing, and then a percentage gain versus the HODL thing. And then it will do the same thing for Uniswap V3, right? Shows you the prices, explains what the arbitrageur has to do, shows you what the prices are after the arbitrage, and then gives you an update on what the Uniswap V3 summary looks like, and then it does the same for Carbon, right? And so you can actually step through the simulation if you wanted to, and actually prove to yourself that these calculations each make sense in and of themselves. What would a hyper efficient market motivated to balance these protocols versus each other do during these moments in time? And so the reason why this log file is produced is partly to take away some of that black boxness of what's happening, because I fully appreciate that even though the code is there and anyone who can read Python can interrogate what's done and determine whether or not they agree with it, but this readout means that you don't actually need to be fluent in programming languages to sort of understand what the simulator is doing and whether or not you agree with its conclusions. So that's why I've done that. And that's the other thing that I wanted to show you. So you get all of these PNGs, right? There are hundreds of them. I recommend deleting them after you've got your GIF. You get your GIFs, and you also get this log file, which is I think helpful if you have to write about it, right? So the reason I included that was specifically to help People will write blogs or tweet threads or whatever. But I think that as a collection, right, it's an extremely powerful. It's an extremely empowering data set from which to learn not just about Carbon, but also about these other protocols. Like I see it as being a general purpose thing. It's not, you can use it if you want to investigate how to be a better liquidity provider on Uniswap v3. Right, it will also help you do that. And I fully expect people to use it for that purpose.
Mark, I want to circle back to something that you said earlier. You said that concentrated liquidity is contingent upon the fees that you earn. We didn't get into the fact that Carbon's not. So with that last, like I'm going to use the last example for this, where constant product was like 0.15, concentrated liquidity was 15% more or less. That's including the fees that a trader or liquidity provider is earning in that performance versus model. In Carbon, it's not. That's completely separate. So that 25% is protocol. That those fees are going to the protocol. That's strictly performance based.
Yeah, correct. So and I'm glad that you brought that up. So in the simulator, it knows how to evaluate each protocol independently, right? There's not just like one central function that evaluates each one of these protocols together. Each protocol has their own sets of functions to evaluate them. And what's important here, right, is on the asymmetric concentrated liquidity for Carbon, it knows that these fee earnings cannot be included with the performance metric for this trader, right, for this liquidity provider. And so it is important to note that, right, that despite the protocol actually earning fees alongside the liquidity provider, and that these fees are omitted from the performance tracking. In this particular case, this LP actually still did better than in the Uniswap v3 case, where these fees are included in the performance versus HODL. Right, so that's not a trivial difference, and this also, by the way, is one of the reasons why when we have a look at Uniswap v3's performance on stablecoin pairs where you don't have the same volatility versus Carbon, that Uniswap tends to actually come out ahead, and it's because the protocol fee earnings on the Uniswap side go entirely to the liquidity provider, and nothing goes back to the protocol. Whereas on Carbon, the fee earnings component is exclusively the property of the protocol and will be used for things like buying and burning BNT if that's what the DAO decides. But yeah, it is an important point. You're right to bring it up that Carbon actually has a protocol revenue component, and despite that component, it's often true that the liquidity on Carbon is still better off than if they were on these other two protocols. Not always, but oftentimes that's true.
Another quick question from ZeroX Bear. Does the simulation assume those arbitrage trades actually occur? Is that where intraday volatility comes from?
Yeah, exactly right. And so this is why I said, and maybe we can do that. So for example, if we take let's go ahead and open up one of these things. But yeah, the simulator, it only cares about where the market price is and what trade should be performed in order to make the price on each protocol that value. And so it doesn't care about how long it takes, and it doesn't care about it basically only cares about what the price quote should be. So one of the ways that can hurt the simulator with respect to how it does for Uniswap v3 is that in general, if the price of MIM makes a move from 0.99 to 1.06 or something, that doesn't generally happen in a perfectly straight line. It's actually, having looked at this, it's actually a lot smoother than you might expect, but it's not perfectly smooth. And so one of the ways that we can, and if I zoom up here, So one of the ways that we can sort of give a better representation of what things look like is if we're taking a CSV from CoinGecko, is to take this column and split it out into something that looks like a Hakanashi, a Hakanashi candle. So instead of having just the price column, we're going to have the open, we're going to have the close, and we're going to have the high and low. And so one of the ways that I do this is I'll set something over here that I just call volatility, and we're just going to set that to 100. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So what you can do is you basically say, okay, the high price is going to be the open price plus some amount, right? So if we take this, what we can do is add some random amount, and we're going to say between 0 and 100 times that open amount divided by what we're going to call the volatility number. And that's not going to change at all, so I'm just going to put dollar signs around this. And so in this case, this is quite extreme, right? So here we've got something that where the high price, so the top wick of this candle can be at maximum 2x, right? The current price, and that's not going to happen very often. But look here, it actually happened, and so we know that this is extremely unlikely. But if we wanted to simulate a stupid amount of volume on Uniswap V3, this will actually give it to you so long as we are inside of the price bounds of the simulation. And if we want to make this slightly more reasonable, we can change this volatility number. So if we, paradoxically, if we set this to a higher number, that means that this delta is going to be divided by, is being divided by a slightly higher number. And so this is now, instead of a 2x, this is now a maximum of 10%. And if we set this to 10,000, then this is now a maximum of 1%. And I think in general, this is where I'm sort of getting good data. Something like a 1 to 2% volatility between the top and the open is actually pretty reasonable. Let's go ahead and set that to 1%. And then I usually just drag this down onto the rest of the row. And then to do the low price, what I'll do is basically the same thing, except instead of it being plus some delta, I'm going to set it to minus some delta. And again, this is going to be, plus or minus 1%, which means that if we just take the high price here and subtract the low price, you can kind of see that we're getting about a 1 cent fluctuation for whatever this time frame happens to be. And you can do this as many times as you want, right? Because the point is the simulator doesn't really care how many data points you have, and it doesn't care that these time intervals are continuous. And so this is one of the things that I mentioned in an earlier call, which is that if you want, you could say that that this is a 1 minute candle, and then this is a 1 hour candle, or this is a 1 day candle. And as long as you're getting results that are useful, right, that actually reflect what would have happened during that time period, remembering that what you're actually doing is choosing a trade and a trade amount based on where the market price will end up. So if you want to simulate, for example, 10 trades per block, that's fine, but you need to simulate what the data that you feed the simulator isn't to trade a certain number of times or a certain amount of money, but to move the price quote on that protocol a certain number of times to a certain destination. So it does everything by the target price, the target marginal price, not by the trade amount, which is actually the most sensible way to do it. And then for the close, I usually just do an average of high and low. Okay, and now what we've done is we've generated 4x more data. And we've also got this volatility now that would actually help Uniswap V3 generate more fees in the simulation. And my goal, by the way, is eventually to have, rather than just set this number randomly or based on what I think seems right, or what tends to give good results that match closely with historical data from Uniswap v3. Eventually, what I want to do is to have this high and low and close be a function of the total volume. And so this is something that I'm actually working on right now, so that we can guarantee that for whatever this period of the simulation is going to be, that you get a certain amount of trade volume through Uniswap v3 that's commensurate with this number, and then when you move to a different row, you get a volume that's commensurate with this number, and so on. And this would actually give you a very, very good basis for comparing these protocols on. But it should be noted that Carbon doesn't really care about this. So this is only something that I have to do to investigate Uniswap v3's performance better than we already are, and also to make sure that when we're comparing these protocols that we're doing so in a really fair way. It doesn't affect Uniswap v2 as much, but that's still an important consideration. But just remember, it doesn't affect Carbon at all. So if you are, if you are interested in just looking at Carbon standalone, not necessarily compared to the other protocols, then you don't really need to worry about that. But you can still do this if you want to. Just know that if you if you are doing this, you need to call these columns open, high, low, and close in any order, and you can do it in any case. So if you want to, you can call this, I don't know, low or caps. You can call this open, but just the N is a cap. Here you can do just G and H as caps. Close can be just the L as a cap. Whatever, right? The simulator is quite happy to read all of these. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to save this as mimUSD max modified. Okay. And where did it save that? Give me 1 second. Yeah, it should be there.
Did you pull up me and save it in your downloads? Oh, there it is.
Oh, no, there it is. It's a new Windows 11 feature. Things don't show up immediately. Okay, so again, we're just going to take that file name and get to work. So I'm going to restart and rerun all of these cells. Oops. Okay, so there's the file name. That's when I should rerun it before.
Something else we didn't say, Mark, is it's important to keep those quotation marks in the parentheses. So when you're copying and pasting, make sure that it's within those two.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, and so you can see now, like this was the same mim chart that we had before, but now look at it, right? We've got all of this extra stuff, right? And it's no longer like 800 data points. It's now like more than 2,000. It's like 2,400. And we've got all of this like additional volatility now that's going to make that Uniswap v3 position just so much more performant under simulation, because it's going to get these, these huge, these huge changes that makes Uniswap such a great protocol for these kinds of trading opportunities. And so let's go ahead and do this, but make it like in such a way that both Uniswap and Carbon are like getting their best possible labs. You know what I mean? So I'm going to take this whole, actually, maybe if, I'm trying to imagine what someone who's like critical of the simulator would say. And I think that they would say probably that it would be more profitable to like concentrate the liquidity to get, I don't know, like 85% of these wicks in there. But you can see we're still, we're going down only by not even, about 1.3 cents to the downside, and only, 7 7 or 8 basis points to the upside. So this is still pretty concentrated. Okay, and then for carbon, let's just leave it, right? I think that there's that's quite a lot of crosses happening there anyway. So I'm just going to leave that exactly as it is, and so we're going to be able to do a perfect heads-up comparison. You can see that it's warning us that the market price is starting sort of just slightly out of range. There's not much we can do about that, so let's just hit OK. For the TKN weight and USDC weight, let's just do 1 and 1. Be reminded here that TKN is MIM in this case. For the portfolio value, again, I just do 10,000 every time. And protocol fees, 20 bips. Let's just do carbon and Uniswap V3 this time so we can get through it a little bit faster. Okay, so remember, after you've done that process, what you're looking for is a pickle file that starts with start conditions. And so here's the start conditions, MIM, USD max, modified pickle. So we're going to take that one and we put that directly into our simulator right there. And then we run all of these cells. Good. Okay. And then when the little star appears, you know that it's working. And yeah, here we are. Right. So this should take a couple of minutes. So Jen, if there's anything you want to discuss, now's a good time because we're going to be waiting for a minute or two while we generate all of these files.
The only other thing that I wanted to point out was when we were funding carbon, you know, we were saying 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. You don't necessarily have to fund both sides on carbon.
Yeah, yeah, correct. So now that I can do whatever I want here now. So carbon can be like a true single-sided liquidity protocol if you want it to be. So even though we've got these ranges set up, right, the way that we had, if you want to, you can decide that, you know what, I'm not going to fund any USDC, I'm just providing MIM, right? Or, the other way around. You can provide just USDC and no MIM. It's important to realize, though, that, yeah.
Go ahead. I was talking about where you put your carbon weights, right? Like your TKN weight and your USDC weight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. So that's true as well. So there's multiple ways that you can do it. So we can do it up here, which is determining the price range that you set. But you can also do it down here. And so if we set the USDC weight to 0, for example, then what we're saying is of this $10,000, we want everything to be in MIM. And then the opposite would be if we set that to 0 and we set that to 1, then now what we're saying is we want this $10,000 to be exclusively denominated in USDC. And any combination thereof, right? We can set this to 2-to-1, and this means that we've got about 6,600 in MIM and about 3,300 in USDC, and change. Any number that you put here. It doesn't have to be an integer either. If you're doing something, remarkably precise, and I'm not sure why you would, but you can. You can put decimals in here, and it will respect whatever this ratio is, but just be aware that it is a ratio. These aren't specific percentages or anything like that. Although you can do it that way if you wanted to. So, for example, 2080 would be 20% in TKN and 80% USDC and so forth. But yeah, if you want to do if you wanted to simulate single-sided, you can just set one of these numbers to 0 and then this other number to whatever you want.
Yeah, I think that's the only other thing that I wanted to add that I noticed while we were going through the different examples. 0x, are you still up on the stage? Do you have any questions since we are kind of running your simulations and your requests here? I'm curious to hear from you.
The other thought I had is that we've looked at a bunch of examples that maybe happen to line up well with both UniV3 and Carbon because they're very tight ranges, mean reverting, and the level doesn't move. Would both or either suffer the same downsides if you looked at a much more volatile chart, like just ETH or Bitcoin or whatever?
Let's do that.
That's where you have to start adjusting your ranges to stay in range.
Yeah, we can do that next. In fact, we can probably get that started because I do have. I did have. Okay, let me just copy over.
Are you looking for an example for what?
I
Something other than the tight ranges and.
Yeah, the point he's making is like we could have, in a way, we can be cherry picking for like both protocols here. We've got these changes that that move mostly, essentially mostly sideways. So we should choose something like the ETH chart, which I think is
I sent you that
excellent suggestion.
CSV.
I've actually got it right here. So I've got the. So let me just move that over. Okay, so I'm just pulling up the Ethereum chart here. But I think we actually just completed our simulation. So let's have a look at what the results are first, and then we'll do the Ethereum chart. Okay, so let's get those GIFs. There we go. Okay, so let's do the modified Uniswap v3. Okay, so this is the one that's got a lot more volatility in it. So we've taken the price data that we had, and we added 3 more columns. And so now it's each step of the simulation, right, is essentially looking at the open price. Then it's going variably to either the high price or the low price, and then going to the close price, which we've defined as being the average between the high and the low, just for convenience. And so you can see here, like, when you've got this kind of operation, Uniswap v3 does pretty well, right? And so here it's basically fees accumulating in linear space, which is an exaggerated version of what you would expect of Uniswap v2, which is I guess isn't surprising. But this just goes to show you how important it is to make sure that you do account for that intra-range volatility when you are evaluating Uniswap v3, because it is the lifeblood of that protocol. So if you don't account for it, you're not really performing a sensible analysis. You're just kind of you're not really doing anything valuable. But having said that, it's still worthwhile animating whatever it is you're animating to show how the liquidity moves and how fees accumulate and that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and have a look at how Carbon did on that same one. Okay, this is Carbon under exactly the same conditions, right? Remember, we didn't actually move anything in this instance. I can't remember where Uniswap v3 finished, but I'm just going to call up that.
17.5%.
Oh, good job.
Thank you.
And let's see where Carbon's going. Yeah, so you can see, this is one of the things that is, that benefits Uniswap v3 when you don't have a lot of actual volatility. Is that because it sets the margin, to always be, for example, 30 basis points from the market, then it can actually accumulate fees even when there's not much going on. And so when I improved that volatility, it affected Uniswap v3 in a profound way. But for Carbon, because it's not volume dependent, it doesn't really care. All it cares is like, where are the high prices and where are the low prices? And so that additional price data that we injected, it's not necessarily, it doesn't affect the Carbon simulation that much. So I think in that case, we saw Carbon go to
14%.
Yeah, 14. Right. So it still benefited a little bit, but it benefited Uniswap v3 a lot. And so that's why we need to be careful about adjusting for volatility when we compare these protocols up against each other, and that we can't make super broad statements about the relative performance of these two protocols. We can still make specific claims, which is when there is a big volatile shift that just affects the price. Carbon is likely to perform a lot better under those conditions. But for things like this particular peg, we can see pretty clearly that even though Carbon is still performing admirably, especially compared to to other constant product liquidity pools, for example, Uniswap v3 is really specifically tailored to benefit from this type of activity. So it's not surprising that in a lot of these stablecoin pairs, it actually does come out ahead.